I think as we begin this conversation, we should talk a little bit about what NLP is for some people who may not be familiar and how it's different than traditional psychology. So, there are three ways to think about neurolinguistic programming. The technical definition for it is science where we're studying the structure of seemingly subjective experience. If you see a therapist doing some brilliant work with a person and they're able to get through to somebody, what is the structure of how that actually works? How do they actually do that? There is a free introduction to NLP course that is on our website at nlpca.com. You can take that course anytime. There's no cost for that. It allows you to get into the learning portal and get a feel for what that's like. There's several videos in there. There's also the process that I'm going to demonstrate tonight is also in that free course. And it's a great way to get introduced to NLP and what it can do. There's even a video in there of me showing you some of the different results that you can get using NLP as well. All of the treatment programs that I put together over the years for stress, weight loss, smoking, sports, etc., dealing with trauma, phobias, these are all NLP based. Some of them also use hypnosis as well, and hypnosis and NLP go hand in hand. And one of the ways it's really different than traditional therapy is this. Traditional therapy, which I'm a big fan of, I love, I use, but it's different. And therapy in general deals with the experiences of our life, the stories we tell ourselves about those experiences, and the meaning we ultimately make about those experiences and how that affects our life. So, with really great therapy, and there's lots of great therapists out there, a lot of what we're doing is reframing those stories or reframing the meaning we make about those stories so that it changes how we have an outlook on life. One of the things that NLP adds to that, which is completely different, and I've never seen in any other modality, is NLP also takes into account the story, the meaning we tell ourselves about our experiences and our lives, the beliefs that we have about all that, but it also looks at the structure of how we store these memories in our mind, the pictures, how we store them in our mind, where we store them in our mind, and the sounds. And by looking at the structure and adjusting the structure, we can actually change our neurological response. And probably the best example of that, folks, is in our work with trauma. Both Nick and I were very fortunate to be on the pioneering team for something called the Research and Recognition Project. It was a project that we did for the Veterans Administration quite a few years ago. But this was a pilot project where we were working with severe military and sexual trauma. And there is a lot of research behind this. There's a lot of pre and post brain scans. And we were part of this original crew to train these therapists that worked for the Veterans Center on how to resolve trauma in just a few sessions. And so this is a really good example. We're taking people with the most severe PTSD you can imagine, and pre-brain scan, post-brain scan, it is gone in a few sessions, usually in about 3 treatment sessions and less than 6 clinical hours of work. And it's because we're able to neurologically reconsolidate the memory in their minds, which basically means, to put it in layman's terms, change how they store the memory in their mind. That's something that traditional therapy just can't seem to do. It just goes beyond that. Nick, do you want to add anything to that?
The beauty of NLP is that, as Robert's talking about, is that it's really about the structure of subjective experience, how you create and maintain the experience you have on a daily basis. We think we're at the whim of our emotions or at the whim of our thoughts or the whim of our, internal dialogue, when in reality, all of that has a structure. And once you understand the structure and the little things that you can do to change it, you understand you have a great deal of control over your inner experience. And when you can control your inner experience, your life opens up in amazing ways. I know for me, after I learned NLP, not a day has gone by in my life that I haven't used it in some way to help myself or other people. And literally, I cannot imagine what my life would be like were it not for NLP. It's just such a powerful, useful tool. I love to watch people. How many of you are people watchers? You enjoy watching people? I'll tell you, learning NLP elevated my people watching experience because NLP gives you cues by observation of what people are doing on the inside through their movements, their behaviors, their cues. So you can make a good guess. It doesn't mean that you know for sure, but you can make a good guess that they're making pictures or that they're talking to themselves. You can even begin to see patterns in their thinking just by observing them carefully. And for me, it really opened up that world.
And it's a powerful change agent. We use this as coaches, we use this as therapists to go in and create a strong and powerful neurological change in the nervous system very quickly. And it's clear and it's measurable. So I'm going to talk about this in just a minute. But as you learn NLP, there are three ways to think about NLP because it's a little bit hard for some people to understand. So the first way to think about it is it's a set of excellent modeling tools that you can use to observe, model, and reproduce excellence in any field. So, like if you're Nick and you want to be a better poet, you can model what the great poets are doing, and your ability to accelerate in that domain will be very, very intensified. John and Richard used it to model what these brilliant therapists were doing, and then they came up with a set of therapeutic tools. Other people have modeled trauma and phobias, and they've learned to develop ways to deal with traumas and phobias or resolve internal conflicts or resolve those internal voices that sometimes can plague us a little bit. And the second way to think about NLP is it's a set of processes. We've got this ever-growing catalog of processes that are the result of that modeling that people have been doing. And so it's been archived. And so we've got processes for even things like allergies that you would think would be, how could you resolve that? Well, if you understand how the mind works and how the autonomic nervous system works, it kind of makes sense. But you can do things like allergies, internal conflicts, shocking images, intrusive voices, phobias, fears, limiting beliefs, imprint experiences that people have. These are things that you can change. There's a grief resolution process. There's all kinds of processes that have been archived as a result of learning this, and that field is ever growing. There's strategies as well, strategies for motivation, strategies for creativity, strategies for remembering names. These are some of the things we teach in the NLP practitioner. So there's all these strategies as well. And then the third way to think about NLP is this ongoing field of study where you're studying the structure of that seemingly subjective experience. And this is where a lot of people graduate from the NLP practitioner certification, and then they take their new knowledge of NLP and they bring it back into their chosen field of endeavor or some area they're really passionate in. And that's where you develop your own NLP and you start to develop new ways and strategies and processes to accomplish things. So what is NLP good for? Well, the first thing is managing your internal mental and emotional state so that you have more of an opportunity to feel the way that you want in more situations in life. Does not mean that you're going to be totally zen and feeling totally mellow 100% of the time everywhere, but it will take your bandwidth and open it up dramatically. The second thing it will do is it'll help you stay resourceful during those stressful times, which means you have more choice available to you and you have the ability to stay calm when you want to. Notice for most of us, as we get really stressed and anxious, our window of choice and our ability to have discernment gets smaller and smaller and more narrow until eventually it's like fight, flight, or freeze, or one of these survival type instinct responses. And so by learning NLP, we start to be able to open that bandwidth back up. And we have a lot more behavioral flexibility, which means more choice. One of the things I love about NLP is that we're never taking anything away. We're just helping you to get access to more choice and more options with the full belief that you will always make the best choice available to you in the moment, given the resources that you have. Your unconscious always wants something good for you. There are many what we call presuppositions in NLP, which are not quite beliefs because we're not going to die over them or start a war over them. But where they're useful, we apply them. Where they're not, we let them go. And one is behind every behavior is a positive intended result. Another thing I love about NLP is there's no dogma. There is no right or wrong or good or bad. There's useful or not useful within a certain context. So when I take on a client, I'm coaching them, I never look at them as broken or defective or there's something wrong. I look at whatever behavior they're bringing to the coaching session or they're bringing to the NLP course as a strategy that works perfectly to get the results they're currently getting. And if they want a different set of results, we simply adjust and try a different strategy. The other thing that NLP will do is it will dramatically increase the speed with which you learn. I was flunking out of college at 18, totally ADD, completely overwhelmed with life and school when I first stumbled onto neurolinguistic programming. And I did it because I was desperate to find a better way to learn so that I could actually remember what I read as I was going through these books in college. I was really struggling with learning, and it made learning easier and it made it faster. Because when you start to learn NLP and you start to have this heightened sense of sensory acuity that Nick was talking about, you see patterns and you see what's working and what's not working with a whole another level of clarity. And so I was able to develop new ways of learning very, very rapidly. And that really kind of saved me in college. The next way in which NLP can help you out dramatically is it will help you become more influential in any group that you're a part of. So whether that's your family, whether that's your work group, it helps you to become more influential. And part of the reason for that is you will be better at rapport, your ability to create simpatico with others, because you're going to better be able to understand and you'll be able to listen at a deeper level to what's going on with them and what they really need on the surface level and at the deeper levels. You'll start to hear the differences between people that are more visual. Some people are more visual. Some people they use a lot of words like, do you see what I'm saying? I'm trying to show you something. I want to brighten your day. Do you get my point? And these are more what we call visual words. And some people are a little more auditory. And these people want you to finish their sentences. They want you to speak a little more slowly. They want you to enunciate. They like the sound of that. It has to click. It resonates. And some people are a little more kinesthetic and they kind of have to feel their way through things. And maybe they'll tell you they had a rough day or things are going really smooth. And when you start to hear these types of distinctions, it becomes incredibly easy to create that connected feeling with another human being. And, NLP often gets a bad rap because people see it as manipulative, right? They see techniques and skills like this, behavioral profiling, as a manipulative tool. And it is. But here's the thing about manipulation manipulation means to move with precision and skill. That's all manipulation means. It is devoid of morals, it is devoid of anything else. When your chiropractor manipulates your back, they put your back into place. When your dentist manipulates your mouth, he fixes your teeth. We want people to manipulate us in a positive and useful direction when we ask for it. God can manipulate me to be a better person, right? So manipulation is not a bad thing, but the way to think about it is this. If you really love somebody and you know the distinctions of NLP, you can help them to feel more loved in a way that really works for them. And for me, before learning things like NLP, the only way I had to try and love another human being was to do what would work for me. I had no awareness of how like Nick wants to be loved or how Patricia wants to be loved or what would really help them to feel really understood, really listened to, really cared for. And with NLP and extra sets of distinctions, an extra set of things to notice, I'm able to dive deeper into the needs and wants and desires of other people. And so that's one of the reasons it helps us to coach at a higher level, to do therapy at a higher level. And if you care about somebody, it helps you to connect with them at a much deeper level as well. So that's what I mean when I say it helps you to become a lot more influential because you can better understand people. And it's excellent for modeling excellence and modeling pathology, problems and how people get stuck and how people, one of the first things I modeled in mental health was how people got panic attacks. And the reason I did that was because there was a woman I was driving over hill to Half Moon Bay every day from San Mateo, and she had horrible panic attacks almost every day we drove over the hill. And so I started to ask her questions using some basic NLP, and we were able to model her recipe or her strategy for how she got panic attacks. And by doing that, and by helping her to become consciously aware of all the steps she had to take to get the panic attacks, they just stopped happening. Okay, so we can use it to model things like that to better understand how to help people. So if you have questions, put them in the chat or go ahead and unmute yourself, and we'll kind of just take one at a time.
About us or about
Mhm.
how to deal with situations in life. That's what NLP is good for.
Mhm.
Can it help with co-parenting and like really sort of like what's your guys' stance on kind of this whole toxic, dynamic, narcissistic, like do you guys allow that is possible? Like tell me a bit about, yeah, I'm sure you've come across it.
Well, Robert's probably better at answering that because he's done some co-parenting.
Yeah, well, the
With
first thing you mentioned, yes,
children.
you mentioned a couple different things. The first one was co-parenting. Does it help with co-parenting? Well, we do have a module on conflict resolution and negotiation and mediation. So it will definitely help with co-parenting. You know, the challenge with co-parenting is it's a rapport issue, right? And there's ongoing negotiations. And I think one of the most challenging for those of us who've been through divorce is the difference between surface level requests and deeper desires and needs,
Mm,
right? So like when you have someone, if you're trying to co-parent with someone who feels hurt and who feels,
you don't
maybe,
trust also, like there's,
yeah.
yeah.
And like, have you noticed before that a lot of times, like how many people here have been through divorce, right? And if you've been through a divorce with kids, you know the feeling of we're having a conversation and it should be just about some surface level thing like picking up the kids or whatever, but you feel this deeper, like darker energy underneath it, like they're trying to get back at you or they're hurt or they're trying to control you or something like that. So there's these conflicting needs, wants, and desires going on.
Mm,
And so, can NLP help address that? Absolutely. And it can also, and in a couple different ways. One is you not getting as grabbed when you're dealing with that partner.
mm,
I think the secret to co-parenting is to make it about the kids and not make it about the relationship between me and my ex. And to keep that out of it as much as possible. For that, I need to be on my A game and not get grabbed. And a grab to me is anytime I go into an emotionally altered state where I start to lose choice.
yeah, I've
So it
heard
can
you
look like,
say that.
yep. Because a grab can look like anger, or it can look like being withdrawn. It can look apathetic. It can look depressed. It can be violent. I mean, it can be a number of different things, but what they all have in common is we go into an emotional altered state where we lose choice. So the
Mm,
more we can stay in a calm, secure way of being when dealing with challenging people and dealing with challenging relationships, the better results that we're going to get. Okay.
thank you.
Yep. So I think in that sense, that's how it would help co-parenting a lot. Now, dealing with narcissists, if you're really dealing with that, um, that's probably going to be more of a setting a boundary issue and doing that. And it's if you're, the challenging thing with dealing with exes, if you have kids, is that's a relationship you can't just cut out and walk away from.
Yeah.
You know, you have to deal with them. And one way to look at it is because since you have to deal with it, and at least in my case, I have to deal with it, right? Is to look at it as, I kind of lovingly think of my ex as my spiritual advisor and
Mm,
guru. She teaches me patience, acceptance, tolerance, and I'm sure I do the same for her, right? I'm sure she would tell you
mm.
that
Yeah,
I do the
many
same for her.
things. Yeah.
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 So
Thank you. I
great
feel
question.
really heard, and yeah, I really appreciate that perspective. Thank you.
I think one of the best skills from NLP is the ability to manage ourselves effectively and the ability when we are triggered in some way to have tools and skills to do the reflective work to find out what's the belief under that that's running us at that moment. And we have tools in NLP for changing beliefs. In fact, I think of all the things that I've ever learned in the transformational field, NLP has the most precise, the most powerful, and the most effective tools for changing limiting beliefs, which then free us up from a lot of those responses. And a lot of what's happening, I think, in the dance of difficulties between people is that we fall into our most limiting beliefs about ourselves and about them. And that's when we become unresourceful. That's when we become more likely to be overwhelmed by the emotional response rather than being able to, sort of take that step, reframe it, or do what we need to do in order to be resourceful and handle it more effectively. So like Robert's talking about, this idea of having choice is key to NLP, and a lot of NLP tools support that. So I think that anytime you're having difficulty with people or with other people, the challenge a lot of times is not in the other person necessarily. They're just doing what they do. The challenge is in our response to that and what we do, the rumination and stuff we do inside. The Buddhist tradition has this idea of suffering, and suffering is all that rumination we do inside. Suffering is about the response we have to life, not about what life does to us. But a lot of times we think life does something to us, and then we grapple with it and do all kinds of things that actually create the suffering. And I think of NLP as one of the best tools for getting out of suffering and freeing us up from being in that space where we're responding from that place that limits us and produces and creates problems in the world beyond that. It's interesting because just before this, earlier, I was listening to a person talk about stress and some research that was done on stress, where they had people see videos that indicated there's scientific research that says that stress actually does positive benefits for us. And then they had other people look at these, scientific research and videos about stress being debilitating to us. And then they put these individuals into a stressful situation. It was a job interview kind of thing, a stressful situation. The interesting thing is that the people who perceived in advance that stress was positive handled the job interview demonstrably better than those who had this idea that it was a bad thing. And they tested from their saliva what hormones they were producing. The interesting thing is those who had the belief it was bad produced cortisol, which is the stress hormone, and there was another one in there that's a negative hormone. The people who had believed that it was good, they produced DHEA and oxytocin. Oxytocin is called the hug hormone because it's the thing we produce when we're hugged or we feel nurtured and loved. Isn't that interesting that it was this idea in their mind that changed their physical response? And so the key to that, making that work, I think, is when you can give a person a sense of belief about something that is enduring, or give it to yourself that is enduring. Then you can handle stress, the stressors of life, not as debilitating, not as limiting, but as actually things that are making you a better person, things that are giving you new resources, things that are strengthening your immune system, actually. And so it's all about perception to a large degree. And that's where I think NLP shines, is helping us to be able to make those shifts, see situations or think of situations in ways that actually help us to do better in life. But I'm going to have to head out here. Thank you all for your time and attention. I wish I had more time with you. I look forward to any of you that can and will come to the course. And so Kyoko, I know you've already enrolled, so I'm looking forward to seeing you in the class and hopefully others as well. So
Thanks for being here, Nick.
yeah. So
Okay.
see you all later, hopefully.
All right, take care. So the next question that's up here is, what's the differences between the practitioner and the coaching courses? That's a great question. So the NLP practitioner course, practitioner certification course, is really, that is where you want to start. That is where you learn the foundational skills of NLP. It does not make sense to do the coaching course until you've done the practitioner course. So step one is, if you haven't taken the free intro course, would be that, right? And that's essentially some of what's in the first module, but not all of what's in the first module, just to give you a feel for what it's like to be in the course. And then you take the NLP practitioner course. That is the basic course. That's where you learn the fundamentals. And some people, it's usually about 50-50. Some people will be in it for their own personal development. They might be a manager, they might be a leader, they might be an entrepreneur, they might be a mom, they might be an artist, they might be, a mental health worker. And we get all kinds of people from all walks of life, very eclectic group in the practitioner, but about 50% of them are kind of coaches, or they're looking to get skills to work with other people. And about 50% are looking for skills to help themselves and help solve problems and get more clear on where they're going in life. And so the NLP practitioner will give you the fundamentals. And the full write-up is on the website, nlpca.com. There's videos about each section that go into depth, so I won't go too much into it here. But modules 1 through 3 are about mindset and personal and professional excellence. Modules 4 through 6 are how to get clear about what you want and to know what gets in the way. Modules 7 through 9 are about accessing feelings or states of mind on command and how to use hypnotic language to create change for yourself. Modules 10 through 12 for the co-parents in the room is how to resolve conflicts, where you learn negotiation, mediation, and integration. Modules 13 through 16 are about how to create strategies for success and plan for the future. And in that basic practitioner course, you're going to learn about 52 different strategies and a number of NLP processes that are profound, including how to resolve traumas and phobias. That's probably one of the biggest processes in there, along with learning what we call the conflict integration process. How do you resolve this internal tug of war between, part of me wants something, part of me doesn't? So for example, let's say someone's smoking. Most smokers, when they come in my office, part of them wants to keep smoking, part of them wants to stop. Some people struggling in relationships, part of them wants to stay, part of them wants to go. People struggling with their career, part of them wants to keep the job, part of them wants to quit. And these tug of wars, if you imagine two strong people pulling in the opposite direction, they're exhausting to the nervous system, they're exhausting to the immune system, they're just exhausting to the body in general. And so you can use NLP to clear up a lot of these deep internal conflicts. If you have unwanted habits around eating or other behaviors, there is a process called the 6-step reframe that we learn in the NLP practitioner as well. That's really great for that, for going in and resolving internal, habits and behaviors that we're doing. And remember, from an NLP standpoint, behind every behavior is some positive intended resource, but a lot of times we install behaviors in 3rd grade, 4th grade when we don't know any better. When we're not, when we're young, if mom gives you a cookie every time you're upset, you might reach for food every time you have a tough day as an adult. And that is a pattern, that's a program that you've got wired in there. What we know from neuroscience now is we can begin to rewire the mind. We can create new, what we call neurosynaptic connections in the brain, which happens when we change beliefs and we open our mind, and we can strengthen these things called myelin sheaths. There was a very famous study, it was a Harvard study done where they took 3 groups of people. The first group practiced a piano piece for a period of time. The second group just imagined they were practicing the piano piece. And the third group did nothing. And of course, the first group developed new neurosynaptic connections that they could see the activity in the prefrontal cortex, and they built the skill out. And we expected that. But what was really interesting was the second group that only visualized it, they grew 80%, over 80% of the same neurosynaptic connections. They had the same areas of the prefrontal cortex activated, and they developed that. And so let's say, for example, that you or someone you know has a fear of public speaking. For a lot of those people, when you have a fear like that, it's very hard to cross that threshold and get them to get up in front of a room long enough that they can learn to feel comfortable with it, right? But when you can practice visualizing that with something like NLP, you can quickly start to build those neurosynaptic connections, and it helps create a bridge between how you are now and how you want to be. And so you can do that in a number of different domains. And I don't want to give you too much jargon here and confuse you all, but I'll just say that, what Nick said about using NLP every day of his life since he first learned it, that is absolutely 100% my experience as well, and the experience of everyone I know who is a kind of NLPer, someone who has really learned NLP. In addition to that, real NLPers, in my mind, embody the presuppositions of NLP, which means we're living by them. I really believe no matter how self-destructive a behavior I have is, or someone else has, like, people I deal with, that underneath that is some positive intended result. And it may not be working at all. In fact, often it's working completely against. It's right. If it's intended to bring me joy, it's making me miserable. But if you can look at these things with a non-judgmental, curious mindset, you can use something like NLP to really start to understand that puzzle and then change it and shift it. And so it's better to show you than to tell you. So since I promised a demo and we've got about 15 minutes left, what I would like to do is I'd like to do a demo with one of you. And here's what I'm going to ask. And you can all do this right along with me, but I want to do a demo with one person in particular. And what I would like you to do is think of a memory, not a trauma. Okay. And the reason we don't want to do this with a trauma right now is if you have a trauma, and particularly if you have PTSD with that trauma, it can get triggered very easily, and then you could become unresourceful, and then I wouldn't be able to work with you. So I don't want something that's that troubling, but I want something that really bothered you. And it still bothers you just thinking about it. This could be something that happened when you were 3 years old, or it could be something that happened earlier today. And I'm not going to ask you any questions about who was there or what happened at all. I'm only going to ask you questions about, like, where is the image located in your mind? Okay, so this is totally content free. So if you volunteer to do this with me, here's what I'm going to tell you. If it's not a trauma, it will change permanently in just a few minutes. And you don't have to tell me any details about who was there or what happened. I will not ask any details like that at all. So like all of your answers, as far as everyone's concerned, are going to be completely anonymous. No one's going to know anything about it. You're going to think of a memory that thinking about it still bothers you, and give it a code word so that I can reference the code word. So you can say orange, or you can say volleyball. No one's going to know what it is. And then all I'm going to ask you is, on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being the worst, how much does it bother you right now just thinking about it? Okay. So with that said, and this is going to be, it's very fast too. This is not going to take a long time. It's only going to take a couple minutes here. Who would like to play with me on this and try this out? I just need one volunteer. Wendy. Okay, great. Thank you, Wendy. And so, Wendy, here's what I want to know. So what's the code word for this memory of yours?
I am going to say bridge.
Bridge. Okay, great. So what I want you to do now is go ahead and make an image of bridge in your mind, this memory in your mind, and really notice it. Notice what you notice about it. Go there in your mind, and I want you to rate it for me on a scale of 0 to 10. 10 being the worst, 0 being not all. How much does it bother you right now just thinking about it?
8.
8. Okay, great.
I would say an 8. Yeah.
Now, is there any concern? So in NLP, we call this an ecology check. This is a memory of something that happened some time ago?
Yeah, just a few years ago.
Just a few years
Just
ago.
about
Okay, great.
2 or 3 years ago. Yeah.
Is there any concern if we completely remove the sting from this memory? You'll still have the memory, you'll still have the learning, you'll still have whatever decisions you made out of that. But if we just remove kind of the icky feeling, is there any concern with that?
None at all. That would be great.
Beautiful. Okay, great. So first thing I want to know is this, and folks, for those of you who are watching this, what you might want to watch is Wendy's eyes as we're doing this. Watch where she looks and things like that. You just do what comes natural to you, Wendy. But here's the first question I'm going to ask about bridge. First thing is, if this is a picture in your mind, where is it located? Does it feel like it's right in front of you, off to the left, to the right, up, down? Like, kind of point to it for me.
I think off to the right a bit.
Yeah. So if you just close your eyes and take a look at it, yeah, you're kind of looking up and to the right. So it's off to the right, maybe up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. Next question is about how far away does it feel to you? How far away does it seem to be for you? Like a couple inches, a couple feet, a couple yards,
Just inches.
distance,
Just
kind of
inches.
inches? Okay, great. Inches. Here's another weird question. Is it color or black and white? So if there's any color, folks, in it at all, if it's like all gray and there's a little bit of red, it's a color. So if it's any color at all, it's a color. Is it color or black and white?
I would say color.
Color. Okay, great. All right. And then is it a movie or still frame? Now, again, if there's any movement at all, it's a movie. If there's
It's a
no
movie.
okay, it's a movie. Okay. Last question I'm going to ask you is, do you see yourself in it, or is it like you're there looking out of your own eyes?
I see myself in it.
Okay, see myself in it. Okay, good. So that means you're a little bit more dissociated. Okay. Difference is, like, imagine, folks, dissociated would be like you see a roller coaster like a half a mile away and you see two people on it. One's Robert, one's you. You see it from a distance. You see the roller coaster go up and down versus imagine you're on the roller coaster going down the hill, wind in your hair, right? That's associated. This is a little bit more dissociated. Now, in NLP, we work with these things called modalities. So pictures is a modality, or what we see. Sound is a modality, things we hear. Smell could be a modality, taste could be a modality, and what we feel could be a modality. But when we take one of these modalities and we break it up into smaller bits and pieces, it's called a sub-modality. So we're only going to work with one sub-modality here, and that is distance. So what I'd like you to do is take this image. Now open up your eyes for a minute. Okay. See my book here? Notice as I move my book away, it appears to get smaller. It's not actually getting smaller, but that it looks smaller when I move it further away. Okay. So that's what's going to happen. So close your eyes. See that image of bridge in your mind? You said it's just a couple inches, and I want you to push it out 5 feet. Push it out 5 feet, lock it in at 5 feet, and then just check in and notice how it feels now on that scale of 0 to 10. And re-rate it for me if you can.
It's so strange. I would say a 5.
A 5. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
It's so crazy.
Now what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and push it out 10 feet and just notice what it's like now.
I would say a 3.
3. Okay, great. Now we're going to really get bold. We're going to move it out 25 feet. You'd have to squint to see it. 25 feet.
Okay. I would say maybe a 2 or a 1 now.
Okay.
It's strange. I'm trying to like see it and imagine it's so far away.
Yeah.
Um,
Let's try this. Let's try
yeah.
100 feet. You'd almost need a telescope to see it. 100 feet. Put it out 100 feet, lock it in, and then re-rate it for me.
Yeah. Maybe a 1.
Okay.
Maybe a 1 now. Yeah.
Now I want you to put it in a slingshot and
Okay.
shoot it up into the sun. See it go up into the sun and just burn up into the sun, which, by the way, is 93 million miles away.
Okay. Yeah. That felt great. It feels great.
So what number would you give it on the scale 0 to 10 now?
I would say 0.
0. Okay, great.
A 0.
Now, just for academic sake, try putting it 50 feet behind you. Just to notice what it's like if it's behind you. 50 feet behind you. How does that feel?
Still a 0.
Still a 0. Okay, great.
Still a 0.
Okay, so you can go ahead and open your eyes and shake that off a little bit. Now I'm going to ask you some totally nonsense question. We call this in NLP a state break. Okay, so I'm going to ask you, here's the question I'm going to ask you. What is your favorite ice cream flavor?
I just drew a blank. I would say praline, I think. Yeah.
Praline.
There's
Okay,
a lot
perfect.
of them for me, but
Yeah.
I would say praline.
Okay, great. Now, here's what's interesting. Okay, Wendy. So did we change anything about the memory at all other than its location? No, we didn't change who was there.
No.
We didn't change what happened. I don't even know. We didn't tell you a different story. The only thing we changed was the location of where the memory lived in your mind. Okay?
Yeah.
Now,
Yes.
here's the other thing I want to point out. We took that same memory bridge and you
Mhm.
felt an 8, then a 5, then a 3, then a 2, then a 1, then a 0 about the same memory.
Yeah.
So here's my question, folks, and this is a philosophical question for you to ponder. Which one of those feelings then is true? See, the reason this process is called the submo swap. The reason we put it into I developed this process many years ago, but the reason I put it into the free intro course and into the beginning of the NLP is it's a great opener. It's a very easy process. And if you try this on your own and you don't get it to like fully work immediately, we're going to test it in a minute, but for whatever reason you don't get to fully work, it simply means one of two things. One is it could have been a trauma that you're working on and you just need a different process for that. The other one is it could be something that's much more driven by an auditory voice in your head, in which case I do this a little bit differently. But the reason I do this is it's actually a belief change process. It really proves to your nervous system through experience that how we feel about anything is relative. And it's not to diminish the significance of anything that has happened to you or anyone else in their life. It's not to diminish that at all, but it's to let us know that we don't have to carry around, like if I get robbed in an alley in New York at 3 a.m., okay, I don't need to carry around the physical trauma every time I walk by an alley to remember to not go into an alley in New York at 3 a.m. again. I got the learning. I don't need to carry around that suffering that came along with it. Now, the other thing I want to point out is that in NLP, we have the presupposition, I really take it as a belief, that the unconscious will always make the best choice available to it at the time, which means if we give your unconscious a better choice or a better option, it will automatically default to the better option. So let's put it to the test. So Wendy, in a minute, what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to think about bridge again, but not make any effort at all. Don't try to put it anywhere. Just, it'll probably move around a little bit in the beginning. So give it about 30 seconds, let it settle down until it eventually slows down and stops moving. And then when it does, at that point, I'd like to know two things. Number one, where is it located now? And then number two, how does it feel on that scale of 0 to 10 now? Okay, without any effort at all. So when you're ready, go ahead and do that. Take the time until it settles in. And then once it does, let us know.
I don't know if this makes sense or not, but to me, it's almost like a lower, like I'm looking down at it instead of just like looking, because before when I would think about it, I felt like I was shooting off to the right, just with the memory in my head. And now it's almost like I'm looking down at it, like further away and down at it, and still a 0. If that makes
Beautiful.
sense at all.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
yeah, just a further away and kind of just,
Yeah.
yeah.
Very good. All right. Thank you, Wendy.
You're welcome.
And
Thank
what you'll
you.
find, yeah, So folks,
Thanks.
what you're going to find is that that's a permanent change. That will now permanently stay that way unless there's some ecology concern. I'll give you an example of one. There was one woman that I worked with who was sent to me by a lawyer for domestic violence. We had done trauma work with her, and her ex was somewhat aggressive, and she had to see this guy like twice a week to swap the kids because he hadn't lost full custody yet. And so we did submo swap on this, and she brought it from like a 10 down to about a 3, but she didn't want to go below a 3. And when we asked, when we did the ecology check, there was a part of her that was like, hey, if I'm totally calm and cool around this guy, I may lower my guard. I might make myself vulnerable and let him charm me again or something like that. So she wanted to keep it at a 3 subconsciously to kind of keep her on edge a little bit around him to keep herself safe. So if you run into anything like that as you're working with something like this and it doesn't go below, don't get frustrated. It's probably just an ecology concern. Or like I said, we might need a slightly different technique. But what we've just proven to Wendy here is that you can permanently change the way you feel about something in the past without having to change what happened at all, because we can't change our past. So it's really nice to know that we can get to a more resourceful place and leave it that way. And just imagine what would happen if your mind, Wendy, now went back and took all of those memories that weren't useful or those old icky feelings that weren't useful, and it started to automatically do this process with them. Or if you cleaned them up, you might think
That
about how it would reduce
would
a
be
lot of
amazing.
unnecessary suffering from your life. So again, we don't use this with a trauma. We have a different process for that, folks. And a lot of that process is about keeping the client really safe and doing that. But I'm telling you, I've worked with the most severe military and sexual trauma you can imagine. People dying in hand-to-hand combat, people having their partner die in their arms, and I mean, really gnarly stuff. Even I've worked with some professional athletes, one professional football player who had been hit in the head so much, so many concussions, he had traumatic brain injury. What happens is if you get hit in the prefrontal cortex enough, your fuse goes down to like really small. So he was now very wealthy and retired, but he would blow up at his wife and his kids so much he wanted to kill himself when he came to see me. And the trauma process helped him significantly with that, so he was able to manage more. And he still had, some damage there, but we were still able to help him get quite a bit more resourceful than he was before. So there's a lot of really beautiful things that you can do with neurolinguistic programming. I believe that once you learn it, it will change your life. And it is to this day the most life-changing personal growth class or course I've ever taken. I was a student at NLP Institute of California back in 1990, I think 6 through 99. And here it is, 30 years later, and I'm now the training director and teaching with my idols, Tim and Chris Halbum. Tim Halbum was one of my trainers back in the day, and he's going to be one of the trainers during this course. And for those of you who know who Tim is, he wrote the book Beliefs, Pathways to Health and Well-Being with Robert Dilts. He's been around NLP since the late 70s, early 80s. Nick LaForce has been training for a while, and we all teach people all around the world how to do this stuff, and we've been doing it for a long time. So I appreciate you doing the demo, Wendy. That's just to give you an idea. This is something really easy that you all can just even try on your own. Take a memory, give it a name, make an image of it in your mind, and then just play with. And we only played with location. We could have taken it from color to black and white. We could have taken it from a movie to a still frame. We could have made the picture smaller or made it bigger. We could have distorted the picture, like those crazy mirrors at the fair. And there's so many things we can do. And if you have an intrusive voice, does anyone have an intrusive voice? Boy,
Yep.
if you have one of those, let me tell you, you can
Yeah, I
play
think
around.
I do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
The internal talk, when you were talking about that earlier, that struck a chord for me because, yeah, I have a lot of just, just the negative internal talk that's
yeah.
stifling sometimes. But yeah.
Or
So
like
here's some,
worst case scenario. Does anyone else do that too? Like you always,
yeah.
yeah.
But here's what I encourage y'all to do. If you have an intrusive voice, ask yourself, whose voice is it? You may be surprised to find out it's not yours. It might be like your mom's or your dad's or your third grade teacher who was mean to you or somebody else's. You might have installed the voice of somebody else. And so if that's the case, you might try changing just the voice itself without even changing what it says. Try a goofy voice. Right? I used to hear this voice. It sounded like my dad was like, you can't do that when I went to do something. And I thought that I would need to get rid of that voice to like feel more empowered or to not feel so anxious when I went to do stuff. I just changed it to Demi Moore's voice. And I heard her say, you can't do that. And it felt totally different. I had a totally different experience. And that voice never bothered me again. So this is the kind of stuff you can do with NLP. And it's really nice because we know we can't change what happened to us. The past is done. But what we can change is how we respond to it. And with something like NLP, there's a whole nother level to living and a whole nother set of things that we can do by starting to consider the structure of this seemingly subjective experience in our minds and how we organize that. So it's really powerful. I mean, with trauma, what we know is happening neurologically is the person is re-experiencing a past event like a present day threat. Is it feels like it's happening right now. And when we reconsolidate it, it feels like a distant memory. And that's one of the reasons why it works. Okay. So I got to keep my agreement. It's been an hour. I'll stay on if anyone else has any additional questions. I hope to see you at the NLP practitioner certification. I'll put the link in the chat directly to the course right up on that. There are payment plans available as well. There are study groups. So once you're in the course, we go live for 16 weeks, but we literally have already 3 or 4 years of courses already in there. There's a huge library. It will be there forever. So long after your course is done, you can still go back and access that. There's also a community in there and a list of people who have been through the course in the past and who are currently taking the course, and you can meet with them and practice the different bits and pieces that you're learning as you go through the material. And then for those of you who are interested in getting certified at the end, there's also an opportunity to get a certificate at the end to show people that you have learned the fundamentals of NLP from the NLP Institute of California. And we are part of a global community. Okay?
How is it structured? Is it self-learning or are there class days and time frames?
Thank you. Great question. So the class will start next Tuesday at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and it's 3 hours. It's 12 to 3 every Tuesday for 16 weeks. Now, you could go through the course self-paced if you wanted to. Some people cannot make that 12 to 3 class, but starting next Tuesday for the next 16 weeks, myself, Tim, or Nick will be there live for those 3 hours. We will talk about a new concept, do a demo, and then have you practice it with other people. So it's an opportunity to go through it with a live cohort of people for the next 16 weeks. After that, you have full access to the course. You can continue to go through it self-paced. If you miss a module, the recordings are usually uploaded by Patricia. Thank you, Patricia, by the end of the week. So you can go back and review what you missed in class, or you can watch last year's version of that. So we do these courses live once a year, just once a year. And then you have the option to go through them self-paced and go through them with the cohort. It's obviously better to go through it with the cohort of live people because there's energy there, there's community there. I'm there, you can ask questions. We also have office hours twice a week, and that's throughout the year. That's not just during the course. Every Monday at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time and every Thursday at 9 a.m., I'm online for 1 hour to answer any questions that any students have. So our goal is to really help you learn this stuff, get it in your bones, and go out there and start to practice it in your way of being and in your daily living and get change. We also encourage you as you start the course to think of some big goals for yourself that you have. And then we like to check in at the end of the course and see how many people have already kind of exceeded them. So stuff you want to let go of, stuff you want to change, stuff you want to transform, bring it to the course, see what happens in the 16 weeks. I think you might be surprised. I took it 3 years in a row when I first did it because I knew instantly, like, I need to do this for a living for the rest of my life. And I've been coaching full time since 2002. That's been my sole bread and butter since 2002. And I started learning NLP in 96. So, yep. So I've been doing people puzzles a long, long time, and I love it.